Okay, so imagine this. What if the world map wasn't just, countries and borders, but actually a giant chessboard
Hmm.
where nations are the players and the ultimate prize, global power?
Interesting way to put it.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of strategic vision. Our focus is a really profoundly influential book, Zbigniew Brzezinski's The Grand Chessboard,
Hmm.
American Primacy, and its Geostrategic Imperatives.
Right. Published back in 1997, but he added an epilogue in 2016. And it really did lay out this comprehensive blueprint for America's role after the Cold War.
So what's our mission today?
Our mission really is to unpack Brzezinski's core arguments. It's all about global power, but specifically his focus on Eurasia, this massive landmass.
And how America should sort of manage its interests there.
Exactly, how to maintain stability and, well, America's unique position at the time. And hopefully you, the listener, will gain some real insights into the motivations, the complex gears turning in international relations. We'll even touch on some surprising history.
Yeah, and just to give a sense of the impact this book had, I mean, the reception was pretty significant, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Bernard Gertzman at the New York Times called it a scholarly blueprint, basically, for America to maintain the hegemony it commands.
Strong words.
And Foreign Affairs pointed to its sharp analysis, especially the triangular relationship among China, Japan, and America. That's crucial.
It is. And Kirkus Reviews loved the chessboard analogy, saying Brzezinski plots his strategy several moves in advance.
That's perfectly.
Yeah. And Samuel Huntington, author of The Clash of Civilizations, he called the Grand Chessboard a clear-eyed, tough-minded, definitive exposition of America's strategic interests.
High praise.
Very high. Lieutenant General William Odom said it fills a vital need. And Brzezinski himself, I mean, he wasn't just an academic.
No, definitely not. Former National Security Advisor to President Carter.
Right. A professor of American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins wrote other big books like Strategic Vision, The Choice. He lived and breathed this stuff. He certainly had the credentials to back up such a sweeping vision.
Okay, so let's dive into that vision, the grand premise, as he calls it. Eurasia as the global chessboard.
That's the heart of it. His core thesis, really, is that for 500 years, Eurasia has just been the center of world power, period.
And it still is, in his view, even after the Cold War.
Absolutely. It retains that geopolitical importance. You've got Europe as a core of political and economic power on one side, and Asia as this vital center of growth on the other.
But why? I mean, beyond just the size, why is it the key piece on the board?
Well, the numbers are pretty stark. Think about it. Eurasia holds about 75% of the world's population.
75%. Wow.
Yeah, and most of its physical wealth, we're talking enterprises, natural resources, the whole lot. It makes up 60% of global GNP. And this is huge. About 3/4 of the world's known energy resources.
Yeah, that's dominant.
It is. And look at the players. After the U.S., the next 6 largest economies, all in Eurasia. The biggest military spenders after the U.S., all Eurasian.
Right.
And nearly all the nuclear powers, overt or covert, are there too. So for Brzezinski, the logic is simple. Whoever controls Eurasia, well, they essentially control the world.
Puts it in perspective. And it's not even a new idea, is it? You mentioned historical parallels.
No, not at all. He points back to 1940, that explicit agreement between Hitler and Stalin.
To keep America out of Eurasia.
Exactly. They shared that assumption. He who controls Eurasia controls the world. That historical echo really underscores the long-standing strategic weight of this supercontinent.
So if Eurasia is the prize, what's America's main goal there, according to Brzezinski?
It follows directly. America's primary objective has to be preventing the emergence of any single dominant power in Eurasia, specifically an antagonistic power that could challenge American global primacy.
So managing the balance.
Precisely. American foreign policy needs to use its influence to create a stable equilibrium on the continent, with the U.S. acting as the political arbiter. That's what he means by geostrategy, the strategic management of geopolitical interests on this chessboard.
Okay, so Eurasia is central. America's goal is to prevent a rival hegemon there. That leads us to America's own role, which you mentioned he calls a hegemony of a new type.
Yes, and the speed of America's rise is key here. Think about it going from a relatively isolated power to having this unprecedented worldwide reach.
In just 1 century. It's kind of breathtaking when you frame it like that.
It really is. He hits the milestones. The Spanish-American War in 1898 pushes U.S. power deep into the Pacific.
Right, the Philippines.
Yeah, then the Monroe Doctrine, locking down the Western Hemisphere. The Panama Canal, giving it mastery over 2 oceans.
And World War I.
That was the first massive projection of U.S. military force into Europe, and Wilson's 14 points that injected American idealism, but crucially backed by American muscle.
But then, strangely, they pulled back, right? The interwar isolationism.
Yeah, despite having this powerful two-ocean navy, America retreated. It really took World War II to mark the final end, as Brzezinski puts it, of the European era in world politics.
Leaving the U.S. and the Soviet Union as the successors.
The two global successors, and the Cold War that followed. He almost revels in it, geopolitically speaking, calls it a contest fulfilling geopoliticians' fondest theories.
Leading maritime power versus leading land power.
Exactly. U.S. versus the Soviet Union, North America versus Eurasia, the whole world was the stake.
And fought mostly on the edges of Eurasia.
Right, the peripheries. Berlin, Korea, later the Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, which makes the Soviet collapse in '91 even more dramatic. Brzezinski calls it a black hole opening up.
A geopolitical void.
Right in the center of Eurasia. The whole Sino-Soviet bloc just fragments. And it wasn't just military or economic failure, those were huge. He talks about deep internal weaknesses.
Yeah, he paints a really stark picture of the human cost of communism. Unprecedented biological damage, he calls it.
Millions lost in purges, famines like in Ukraine and Kazakhstan, falling life expectancy for men. Add to that the devastating wars, Russo-Japanese, World War I, the Civil War, World War II, Afghanistan.
And the arms race, just relentless strain.
And while the center was decaying, nationalism was surging on the edges. Ukrainians, Georgians, Armenians, Azeris, the Central Asians with growing Islamic identity, they were all rejecting Moscow.
Even China was dismissive.
Open contempt, calling Russia the hungry land, challenging its ideology. Geopolitically, Russia just shrank dramatically, lost the Baltics, diminished Black Sea access because Ukraine was independent, Turkey gaining influence in the Caucasus. It was a total unraveling.
So after all that upheaval, America stands alone, simultaneously the first and the only truly global power.
That's his phrase, and he breaks down why. What are the attributes of this unique power? He identifies 4 decisive domains.
Okay, what are they?
First, military. Unmatched global reach. He mentions back in '96 nearly 300,000 U.S. soldiers stationed overseas. Compares them to Roman legions, which is evocative.
Definitely. What else?
Second, economic. The U.S. was the main engine of global growth. Third, technological leadership, the edge in cutting-edge innovation.
And fourth, culture.
Fourth is cultural appeal, yeah. Despite criticisms, he says it was unrivaled, especially with young people. American mass culture, TV, movies, music, even internet language back then.
The mecca for advanced education.
Exactly. Graduates of U.S. universities and governments everywhere. Even politicians like Tony Blair adopting that American style.
Which brings us back to this idea of hegemony of a new type. It's not like the old empires.
Right, not like Rome or the British Empire ruling by direct control or colonization. American power, he argues, works through this global system. It's pluralistic, it's permeable, it's flexible.
How so? What makes it different?
Well, a key element is co-optation. Instead of crushing defeated rivals like Germany or Japan, America brought them into its system, even Russia initially.
So integration rather than subjugation.
Largely, yes. And a heavy reliance on influencing dependent foreign elites. Plus, the genuine appeal of American democratic principles, the Constitution, rule of law, civilian control of the military, that had real pull.
And the economic model, too. Free trade, competition.
Hugely attractive, he argues, even in places like Europe and Japan that had different traditions. The system itself has many components. NATO, the bilateral ties with Japan, APEC, the shield over the Western Hemisphere, security deals in the Gulf, things like the Partnership for Peace in the old Soviet space.
It's a vast network.
It is. And he points out that even institutions that seem international, like the IMF and World Bank,
Heavily American-dominated.
deeply influenced by the U.S., traceable right back to American initiatives like Bretton Woods. He calls it an interlocking universe. Power is exercised through bargaining, seeking consensus, but the impulse, the core influence,
It comes from Washington.
ultimately, yes.
Yeah.
He even notes how foreign governments play the game inside the U.S. system lobbyists, ethnic communities engaging in domestic U.S. politics.
It's a complex picture. I remember you mentioned G. John Eikenberry calling it a hegemonic but also liberal order.
Exactly. An order where conflict is contained, managed within this stable political framework, and critically, the threat of war is off the table among the major players within that system. That's the essence of this unique hegemony.
Okay, so if America holds this unique position, how does it actually manage the Eurasian chessboard day-to-day. This brings us to the players and pivots.
Right, and Brzezinski makes a really useful distinction here. He talks about geostrategic players versus geopolitical pivots.
What's the difference?
Players are the states with the power and the national will to project influence beyond their borders, to actually change the geopolitical game. Think France, Germany, Russia, China, India.
Okay, the major powers.
The ones actively shaping things. He notes, interestingly, that Great Britain, Japan, Indonesia, hugely important countries, obviously, but he doesn't see them as dynamic geostrategic players in the same way at that time.
And the pivots.
Pivots are states that are important mainly because of their location, their sensitive geography, and the fact that their instability or vulnerability could have major consequences for the geostrategic players.
Like buffer states, almost.
Sort of, but crucially important ones. His examples are Ukraine, Azerbaijan, South Korea, Turkey, Iran. Understanding this difference, who's actively playing versus who's critical because of where they sit, helps focus the strategy.
Makes sense. So let's apply that. Western Europe, the democratic bridgehead, he calls it. Who are the key players there?
France and Germany. They're the engines of European unity, but, and this is key, they have different visions.
How so?
France, he argues, seeks a reincarnation as Europe. It wants to regain its past greatness through Europe, aiming for a continent from the Atlantic to the Urals, ideally led by Paris. Its nuclear weapons, it believes, add to its global voice.
And Germany.
Germany seeks redemption through Europe. It's less about global power projection, more about anchoring itself securely, especially through its close ties with America for security. It sees itself as the EU's economic engine and leader.
And Britain.
Britain's the exception. Rejects political union, favors free trade. Not a restless major power in his view, but America's key supporter, the loyal ally.
Interesting dynamics. And the U.S. role in this?
Well, Brzezinski points out a bit of a contradiction. The U.S. says it wants a united Europe, but sometimes acts like it prefers an unequal alliance, maybe favoring Germany over France. And for Europe's future, especially with NATO expansion, he says unity means changing the NATO dynamic, not hegemon and its vassals, but a 1+1 formula U.S. plus a united EU. He felt U.S. engagement was vital to combat Europe's own crisis of morale.
He even sketched out a timeline, didn't he, back in '97, looking ahead?
Yeah, a speculative one, but fascinating. He foresaw Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary in NATO by '99, then the EU by 2002-ish.
Then the Baltics.
Baltics, Romania into NATO-EU by 2005. Maybe Sweden and Finland, considering NATO. And looking further, maybe 2005-2010, Ukraine getting ready for serious EU-NATO talks.
Potentially creating a huge Franco-German, Polish-Ukrainian bloc.
Exactly. 230 million people giving Europe real geostrategic depth. For Brzezinski, the stakes were enormous. A unified, expanded Europe was essential for America's foothold, its geopolitical bridgehead on Eurasia.
And the alternative?
Without it, Europe risks just turning inward, getting bogged down by welfare state issues, xenophobia, extremism. A stark warning, really.
Okay, from Europe, let's pivot to another critical zone. Russia. The black hole's geopolitical struggle. That's quite a title.
It captures the turmoil. The Soviet collapse left Russia, in his words, a troubled national state, cut off, vulnerable, facing conflicts on multiple flanks.
And trying to figure out its place in the world. What were its options?
He outlines three main geostrategic paths Russia considered, highlighting the flaws in each. First, this idea of a mature strategic partnership with America.
Like a G2 almost.
That was the initial hope in Moscow, this illusion of a global co-leadership. But Brzezinski argues it failed because Russia couldn't accept its weakened state. It still wanted special privileges. He even blames the U.S. partly, saying Washington agonized for 2 more years after Yeltsin initially seemed open to NATO expansion around '93, a missed historic opportunity.
What was the second option?
Focusing on the near abroad. Basically, trying to reconstruct a Moscow-dominated sphere in the former Soviet space, often with pretty clear imperial language.
Like Kozyrev saying Russia needed to keep its military presence in its old sphere.
Exactly. And the Duma declaring the Soviet Union's dissolution invalid in '96, that kind of thing.
And the third, Eurasianism.
Yeah, this more mystical idea. Russia as unique, neither European nor Asian, with a special Eurasian destiny. Kazakhstan's Nazarbayev even proposed a formal Eurasian Union.
But these ambitions didn't really fly.
Not smoothly. The newly independent states, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, others, they pushed back. They wanted cooperation, sure, but not integration under Moscow. They formed their own groupings. Plus, he argues, the Russian people themselves weren't keen on paying the price in blood or treasure for restoring the empire.
What about teaming up with China or Iran against the U.S.? That idea was floating around.
Brzezinski was very dismissive of that. An anti-hegemonic coalition, he called it, unlikely to gel. Why? No shared ideology, huge economic risks from isolation, and crucially for Russia, China would inevitably be the senior partner,
Leaving Russia in a junior role.
which wouldn't sit well. So his path forward for Russia, starkly simple. Abjure the imperial past, give it up.
And embrace Europe.
Embrace Europe. That means accepting geopolitical pluralism next door, accepting Ukraine's separate existence. His line is powerful. Russia cannot be in Europe if Ukraine is not also in Europe.
So U.S. and European policy should be.
To support those newly independent states, precisely to encourage Russia towards that European choice. It's a very clear, albeit challenging, prescription.
Let's move south now to what he calls the Eurasian Balkans. An ethnic cauldron and an energy prize? Sounds volatile.
Extremely volatile. He describes it as much larger, more populated, more diverse ethnically and religiously than the actual Balkans. We're talking the 9 former Soviet stands, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc., plus Afghanistan. And Turkey and Iran are deeply involved players.
Why so important? Energy, you said.
Massive energy reserves, yes. Natural gas and oil that could dwarf Kuwait or the North Sea. Plus, it's becoming a crossroads for new transport networks. But it's also riddled with conflict potential.
From those old Soviet borders.
Exactly. Arbitrarily drawn lines leading to conflicts like Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and neighbors are always ready to exploit these weaknesses.
Who are the key pivots here? The crucial locations?
He singles out Azerbaijan as the cork in the bottle, controlling access to Caspian and Central Asian wealth, and Uzbekistan as a major obstacle to any Russian resurgence in the region. These states hold strategic keys.
And the big players vying for influence.
Russia, trying to keep its military footprint and control energy routes. Turkey, pulled in multiple directions, Europe, Middle East, its Turkic connections. Iran, pushing its fundamentalist agenda, often tactically aligning with Moscow.
And the U.S. goal.
Primarily, prevent any single power dominating the region and ensure unhindered financial and economic access to those resources. But importantly, the local states themselves are resisting Russian dominance, building their own regional cooperation bodies.
Okay, let's shift focus way east now, the Far East. China rising, Japan reshaping. How does he characterize that region?
Economically booming, incredibly dynamic, but politically he sees it as unstable, prone to tectonic shifts. And a key difference from Europe. It lacks those cooperative multilateral structures like the EU or NATO.
Which means more potential flashpoints.
A lot more. Taiwan is obviously huge. The divided Koreas, especially North Korea's nuclear program. The Coral Islands dispute between Russia and Japan. Border issues involving China with Vietnam, Japan with Korea, China with India. Unrest in Xinjiang. It's a crowded, complex theater.
And China's rise is central to this.
Undeniably. A dominant military power, nuclear-armed, pushing its reach offshore active defense, he calls it, extending into the South China Sea. And its neighbors were already becoming more deferential, even back in the mid-90s.
How does China see itself in this?
As the Middle Kingdom, naturally, viewing its last 150 years of relative weakness and humiliation by outside powers, Britain, Japan, Russia, America, as just an aberration from its historical norm.
But Brzezinski was also a bit skeptical about its immediate global power status back then.
He was. He questioned if the rapid growth could be sustained, pointing to reliance on energy and food imports, worried that excessive military spending could strain the economy, and flagged the risk of internal unrest, citing Tiananmen Square as a reminder. Even tripling GDP, he noted, would leave per capita income low.
What did he see as China's main objective?
Taiwan. Principal objective for the early 21st century. He also talked about the potential emergence of a Greater China, a regionally dominant power, using its diaspora, pushing into Central Asia and the Russian Far East, kind of restoring its old imperial sphere.
And its strategy to get there.
Patient pressure on Taiwan, stirring up anti-Western sentiment in Southeast Asia, and strongly opposing U.S.-Japan security ties, seeing them as a direct threat, a spear of attack.
So where does that leave Japan? America's key ally.
Key ally, yes, and largely a security protectorate at the time. But Brzezinski saw Japan seeking a more defined and autonomous political role. It had vulnerabilities, though.
Like its resource dependency?
Huge dependency on global stability and resource flows, and also culturally not comfortably Asian because of lingering historical resentments from its neighbors.
What were Japan's options as he saw them?
The main one was sticking close to the U.S. relationship. That was the dominant view. But you also had proactive realists like Ichiro Osawa pushing for Japan to become a normal country, more active in global security, maybe changing its constitution regarding the military.
Yeah, another view.
The international visionaries, seeing Japan leading on global humane issues. So Japan itself was grappling with its future role.
Given all that, what were Brzezinski's strategic conclusions for the U.S. regarding China and Japan?
Some very specific advice. First, he warned against paranoia about China. Fears of an aggressive China, he said, were premature and could become self-fulfilling. Organizing an anti-China coalition. Counterproductive.
Why? Didn't he see China as a threat?
He saw it as lacking grand strategic options. It might posture with Russia or Iran, but its economic dependence on the West limited its real choices. A greater China was emerging regionally, he acknowledged that.
So the U.S. should.
Cautiously accommodate China on some issues, but draw clear lines on others. Interestingly, he saw China's growing interest in Central Asia as actually helpful to the U.S. goal of limiting Russian influence there.
And Japan's role in this U.S. strategy.
Japan should be America's vital and foremost partner, but primarily within a global cooperative system, not just as a military counterweight to China in the region. He even floated the idea of a U.S.-Japan free trade agreement.
And that point about Korea.
Yeah, an intriguing prediction. He suggested a reunited Korea without U.S. troops would likely tilt towards China's orbit. Something to think about.
This definitely leads into his final section, the long-term view. Beyond the last superpower, towards a trans-Eurasian security system. That title alone is provocative.
It really is. And perhaps his most striking, maybe unsettling conclusion is this. America, despite its dominance then, is likely the last truly global superpower.
The last one. Why?
He argued the nature of global politics was changing, becoming increasingly uncongenial to single-state dominance. Power itself, knowledge, economic strength was just becoming more diffused globally.
He predicted a decline in the U.S. share of global GDP.
Yeah, a significant drop projected by 2020 from around 30% down to maybe 10-15%. Plus, he pointed to domestic challenges, a multicultural society making foreign policy consensus harder, cultural issues, economic anxieties.
And the messy reality after the Cold War. No end-of-history dividend.
Exactly. Instead of harmony, all these old conflicts, ethnic, national, resurfaced with a vengeance. Barbarism, even. The global stewardship America inherited was, as he put it, buffeted by turbulence.
So, faced with this potentially temporary dominance, what should America's strategy be? What's the legacy?
He laid out a twofold goal. First, pragmatically perpetuate America's dominant position for as long as possible, at least a generation, and preferably longer still.
Okay, maintain primacy. What's the second goal?
Second, and this is crucial for the long term, use that period of primacy to build a geopolitical framework for shared responsibility. Peaceful global management involving others.
How would that work? He had phases, right?
Yes, a phased approach. Short run, maybe 5 years. Focus on managing Eurasia, using maneuver and manipulation to keep geopolitical pluralism alive, prevent hostile coalitions from forming, basically play the chessboard skillfully.
Keep rivals off balance.
Essentially, middle term, maybe up to 20 years. Actively foster strategically compatible partners, build relationships to shape a more cooperative trans-Eurasian security system.
And the long run.
Long run beyond 20 years. The goal is to evolve into a global core of genuinely shared political responsibility. America transitions from sole hegemon to a leading partner among others.
So how does this apply to the key players? Europe.
With Europe, America needs to actively encourage and, well, prod it towards greater unity and expansion, both EU and NATO. And crucially, accept Europe as a future true partner, not just a junior ally. Maybe a transatlantic free trade agreement, joint planning.
And Russia. Still trying to guide it towards Europe.
Yes, reinforce that geopolitical pluralism in its neighborhood supporting Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan is key here to discourage any return to imperial ambitions. The ultimate aim remains Russia making that post-imperial choice in favor of Europe.
And China. How to manage the rising power.
Avoid paranoid fears, he warned again. Don't try to contain it aggressively, but don't appease it either. Treat it with respect. Bring it into global institutions like the G7. as it was then.
Engage it strategically.
Yes, promote dialogue on shared interests. Stability in Southeast Asia, avoiding force over offshore issues, peace in Korea, Central Asian independence, balance in South Asia, find common ground where possible.
And all this leads to his ultimate vision, TESS.
TESS, the Trans-Eurasian Security System, envisioned for the early 21st century. It would involve an expanded NATO, linked cooperatively with Russia, but it would also centrally include China and Japan, still tied to the U.S.
Bringing all the major Eurasian players together.
That's the idea. He imagined it potentially leading to a standing security committee with America, Europe, China, Japan, maybe a confederated Russia, and India. A truly shared structure for managing Eurasian and thus global security. It's a very bold, long-term vision.
So we've taken quite a journey through Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard, a really detailed strategic roadmap for thinking about global power, always circling back to Eurasia as the core.
And that final powerful conclusion, that America is likely the first, as well as the only, truly global superpower, but also likely to be the very last, it really forces you to think about the temporary nature of even unprecedented power.
Absolutely. And that leaves a really important question for you, our listener, to ponder.
In a world where power is becoming more diffused and we face huge new global challenges, climate change, demographic shifts, you name it, how do you see the next chapter of global order unfolding? Yeah, what role is there for international cooperation, maybe even along the lines Brzezinski envisioned, in navigating a future that looks very different from those last 500 years of Eurasian-centric power struggles? It's a future we're all part of shaping, really, one move at a time on that grand chessboard.